Hi everyone, we are Group A, and this is our presentation which focuses on mental health issues within the Black youth community.
The current COVID-19 pandemic and restrictions associated with it that are meant to contain its spread negatively affected many people around the world. The spread of the virus and social isolation has also greatly influenced the mental health of adolescents. A recent study by Max et al. Has investigated the effects of the pandemic on adolescents' mental health and emotional well-being. As a result, data from the research proved that youth mental health has decreased during the pandemic compared to data from pre-pandemic. Main factors that contributed to such decrease appeared to be social disconnection from friends, more conflict with parents due to lockdown, difficulties during online learning, such as problems with technology and not understanding the material, not being able to ask questions, and lack of motivation. According to the study, these factors were associated with higher levels of anxiety and depression in adolescents. Our poster will explore this topic further, focusing on how the COVID-19 pandemic has specifically affected the mental health of Black youth, given the added stress of systemic racism in the United States, as well as the issues associated with teenhood and adolescent development. We will look into the lack of mental health literacy, as well as issues such as shortage of Black mentors and other societal and cultural factors that contribute to this dilemma. Our poster will explore those root problems and suggest strategies and resources that will help address the dilemma.
Here is a brief background history on mental illness. For a long time throughout history, mental illness was seen as a possession by supernatural force or demons. In the 16th century, people began to acknowledge that the brain could get sick as well as the physical body. In the 18th century, asylums started to treat mentally ill people, which were at first pretty horrible in their tactics, but were reformed in the 19th century to be more humane. Currently, we treat mental illnesses differently depending on the illness. There are many different approaches. Often they include therapy and medication. Mental health has become an increasingly talked about issue in recent years. However, mental health issues themselves have been harming people for centuries. Black people, people of color, and other marginalized communities face many of the main causes that lead to mental health issues, such as poverty, lack of support, violence, and discrimination. Black people have suffered trauma historically and to this day. That trauma is passed through generations, which can lead to the cycle of negative mental health impacts, especially on youth. Mental illness can be the result of a few different factors, but are mostly a mix of biological and environmental impacts. If your ancestors have had a history of trauma, anxiety, depression, and other illnesses, you can continue to face abuse and neglect in your lifetime. There is a chance you will develop depression, anxiety, or other mental illnesses. Within the past year, people have had to face new challenges like no other. We all felt the isolation, anxiety, and sadness. This feeling was heightened for those who face poverty every day. The youth had to stay home and do school from there. Sometimes they did not have access to Wi-Fi or a functioning computer. Sometimes they had to care for siblings because their parents had to work. Some people also lost family members to COVID and had to deal with the grief. All these factors are roots that grow into an unhealthy mental state.
From our research, we found some strategies that can be used by youth workers to address this dilemma. Firstly, creating health literacy interventions by engaging members of Black communities is a key component to offering support. The goal is to sustain methods of health literacy, support education and resources that are culturally and linguistically suitable, acceptable, usable, and effective. Much research points to participatory approaches as a way to uphold diverse and shared cultural values, experiences, and beliefs within the affected communities, a method that implements mobilized action as a community to improve practices and policies affecting the issues of mental health. Another main strategy to support those facing mental health dilemmas, specifically within Black communities in which we are focusing, is to use culturally tailored approaches, for example, storytelling or graphics, which are interactive and appropriate culturally to help represent diverse health conditions which are not usually provided within mainstream resources. Hard copy or virtual materials that embody real-life experience, images that are culturally appropriate, and steps that are action-centered have statistically been received by Black communities and Black youth in particular in a helpful way in terms of increasing low health literacy. Another approach that is highlighted in research in the accessible method of using virtual platforms, for example, an app or a website, to reach Black Americans with low health literacy. These online digital platforms can widen intervention to reach a larger number of people who need support and increase mental health literacy. Within this strategy, it is important that health information can be tailored to the health needs, literacy needs, technical needs, and personal and cultural values of the community members. In addition to specifically reaching Black youth, the use of radio or TV can be an effective strategy to engage youth and provide a simple source of information that might be more fun and animated for the youth. Providing community youth health workers who are culturally competent is an essential method to provide support for things like navigating the health insurance system. Hiring someone who has had a personal connection or still does have a personal connection to the community, is knowledgeable in the diverse and varying inequalities faced by Black youth within the mental health dilemma, and someone who can form a trusting relationship is a key intervention strategy. Finally, as supported by research from a 6-week program at 12 churches within the Black community, religious organization can be a good strategy for mental health education, information, and support. Using varied formats like individual meetings, group discussions, and physical activities, intervention can be supportive and accessible for all members of the Black youth community. Research suggests church leaders or members of churches' parishes can be a great resource for engaging youth members of the church in a decently long program to build supportive relationships and educate youth through increasing their mental health literacy. In one study, churches combine the technological strategy with their religious connection by installing touchscreen kiosks with health info within church buildings to successfully further engage youth in their community and in their own education about mental health. These strategies provide possibilities for other communities to support the Black youth community through intervention and through the promotion of accessible information, which is very helpful in terms of the dilemma currently being faced by Black youth in terms of mental health.
Mental health resources for people of color, especially Black youth, have always been scarce. This was especially seen in the global pandemic of 2020 as many people of color began to struggle with their mental health. Communities of color throughout this country, often frontline workers, have experienced the worst outcomes of this pandemic, such as food insecurity, homelessness, and even losing loved ones. This is especially true for the Black community and Black youth. Black youth throughout our country had to attend school virtually, facing challenges like social isolation and depression. Local resources and online resources are so important for Black youth, as it's a way to connect with therapists and psychiatrists and wellness practitioners that can connect with them through their identity, with shared identity and share experiences. I especially think that online and virtual resources are really important for people of color, especially Black youth, because there's such scarcity of therapists and psychiatrists throughout our state and through the country that it is hard to connect in person at times. So this online and virtual aspect is really helpful for many of us, as we can again connect with more of us throughout our country. But again, local resources are very important as well. So some of the local resources that I identify were the Multicultural Wellness Center, which is here in Worcester. In this wellness center focuses on culturally centered counseling for African Americans, Caribbean, Latino, and biracial people. They also have multi-language counseling available, individual, group, and family therapy. They have behavioral health programs, in-home services, psychiatric services, specialties in EMDR, trauma and substance use disorder, as well counseling. The second resources that I want to talk about is a Refugee and Immigration Assistance Center. I especially like this resource because Worcester is such a large refugee community, and I think that this Refugee and Immigration Assistance Center really can cater to the specific type of experience that maybe our Western or more American therapists might not be able to really cater to. And I think maybe refugees and immigrant populations will be more hesitant to go to. So I really love this resource, and as an immigrant myself, this is a place that I would love to look into. And I am really happy to see something like this here in Worcester. The third local resource that I identified was Be Renew Therapy and Wellness Center, and this is in Framingham, which is a little bit further. But I really like this because this is a Black-owned. This is owned by a female identifying Black therapist, and she caters to trauma and youth issues, or those who are struggling, which obviously is very important, what we're focused here. But also she does faith-based counseling, which I think is especially important for POC and Black communities. I think a lot of the stigma around therapy can be lost with the fact that it is not very connected to our culture. So I think finding ways such as religion, language, and share identity is really important for therapy, and again, to reach those really important populations. And lastly, I have the online and virtual resources, which are the Ethel Club, which is a paid membership based virtual community with classes, live events, and wellness resources promoting for the well-being of people of color, which I think is awesome. But I also like Safe Space, or the Safe Place, sorry. And it's a free smartphone app focused on psychoeducation and self-care for minority mental health, and is geared towards the Black community. And lastly, I really like this one, and it's online sister support group, and this is specifically catered to obviously all women, but especially Black women, and it's a way for other Black women to talk to one another and share life skills to improve their mental health and well-being. And I just think that that's a really great, again, safe space, open up to those who we might feel judged. So again, I think that all these local resources and online resources are amazing for Black youth here in Worcester, and even outside of Worcester.